What's going on, folks, and welcome into Season 4, Episode 2 of Hog Hoops Live. I am your host, Curtis Wilkerson, joined by my co-host, partner in crime, HawgSports basketball analyst Andrew Ellis. Arkansas basketball is 3-0 on the season, but it hasn't necessarily been smooth sailing all the way through here. We're going to look back at Monday's win over Old Dominion with, maybe what went right, what went wrong, and some of the problem areas that Eric Musselman has laid out for this team. It's a loaded show today. No time to waste. Let's get started. All right, before we get rolling here, I do want to remind you of all the ways to follow the show. We do have a new look this year, but we're still in all the same places. We stream live on YouTube and Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to the Hog Hoops Live YouTube page and our HawgSports Facebook page. You can find us in podcast form, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it, the same place that you find HawgSports Live with Trey Biddy. Whew. All right, let's get into it. Arkansas beats Old Dominion, a scrappy Old Dominion bunch, 86-77 last night. You take a win 10 times out of 10, but it wasn't pretty. I never felt like the game was in question, but Arkansas really wasn't able to put the Monarchs away. Andrew, my man, hit me with maybe your top positive and your top negative from this game.
Well, I think the top negative has to be the fact that they gave up 11 threes to a team that entered the game 336 nationally in three-pointers made per game. Not a team that, had been playing good off. I mean, they were averaging under 70 points a game. The defense, point blank, it was just horrible. And it was kind of baffling how bad the defense was. And, when we talked to Muss after the game, you could tell some of that frustration that we'll get into later. But it was just it was a kind of surprising performance. If this team had been bad defensively coming into the year, I probably wouldn't have held it against them, considering all the new pieces and some of these newcomers aren't necessarily lockdown defenders or anything. But considering how well they had been playing on that end leading up, it was a little surprising to see them struggle so much in that department. Then the positives for me, 4 turnovers is just such a small number. It really is. You see this team last year it felt like 15 was a given. They were going to turn the ball over a ton, and it kind of limited their offensive ceiling. Arkansas turned the ball over, I believe it was 9 times against Gardner-Webb on Friday, and then 4 times again here against Old Dominion on Monday. So it's like, if Arkansas is going to consistently do stuff like that and really take care of the ball and make the most of their possessions, I feel like everyone talks about ceilings. I feel like the floor for this offense is just incredibly high, because I feel like when you have the talent they have, and if you're taking care of the ball and getting, as Musk calls, a shot on goal every time, I feel like this team's going to be in good shape offensively. So, and there were still some pieces I liked defensively. Old Dominion only shot 5 free throw attempts. That's a good number. And Arkansas, there were some moments in Mekhi Mitchell's emergence was nice to see, but overall, I'm trying not to overreact too much, but it was definitely a step back for this team defensively that I didn't really see coming.
Yeah, I think I would tend to agree with all that. It's very interesting because we've seen over the course of the last few years here, Arkansas is usually really, really good on the defensive end. They struggle some offensively, but it's kind of flipped on its head a little bit. And yeah, I thought it was an efficient performance from the Razorbacks offensively. They shot it well, 50% from the field. You like it. They knocked down some 3-pointers. Man, I think they're shooting nearly 40%, if not over 40%, from 3-point range so far this season. So that's definitely good to see. What was it? The free throw differential was like 29-5. That's really good. But they weren't making them. So that's not great. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's kind of a surprise to me that Arkansas hasn't been able to convert from the free throw line. I thought that was going to be an area that would be a lot better for them. Some of the good in terms of the players, Ellis, wow, man, I thought he really commanded the floor. 17 points. He led the team in scoring. That dude can get to the rim whenever he wants. I've been kind of waiting for him to have that breakout scoring performance. 8 assists, 0 turnovers. What more do you need from a floor general, in terms of offensive stuff? Mekhi Mitchell, we've been trying to figure out that center spot. He gives you a double-double. He's definitely got some things to work on. We'll talk about that too. And then Devo. You got good Devo for a change offensively. Arkansas is in some foul trouble there early. He steps up, gives you 10 points in the first half, 16 overall. It was good to see him get going. But yeah, there's definitely some things to work on, and it all starts on the defensive end. boy, 11 3-pointers. Old Dominion coming into the game, what did they made 8 or 9 combined through 2 games, and they just stroked it all over Arkansas. And I think a lot of the problem there was Arkansas can't guard anybody off the bounce right now. The guards are getting blown by. Old Dominion's able to get into the lane whenever they want, and they're just spraying it out for rhythm threes. And it doesn't matter if you're a good shooting team or not. You're going to be able to knock those things down if you're getting catch and shoots and you're a Division I basketball player. So they've got to do a better job of keeping teams out of the paint, got to be more physical on the glass. I think that's a big area of emphasis. Tell me this. Were you surprised, or was that about what you expected from Eric Musselman after the game? Because the dude was fired up.
Well, I'll tell you, the Gardner-Webb game, I felt like he was angrier. Am I tripping about that? Like, I thought his vibes were like more somber, and he was like actually upset. Whereas, like, I thought after the Old Dominion game, he was upset. He was like so angry that he was laughing. I felt like that's what was going on. I mean, there was a few times where he's at the presser and he's like, I mean, he's like so upset that he's laughing. But I think Eric Musselman, deep down in his heart, he knows this is a very good basketball team. He knows that this team, but I think he also knows he's got to keep these guys keep that carrot in front of them and keep them playing hard. I mean, you saw the way Jeremiah Davenport was playing on the defensive end last night and the energy he was playing with. I think that's a case of a guy who knows, hey, my rotation spot isn't guaranteed. Let me see if I can pick it up. And I think you'll start seeing some of that. I mean, we saw bits and pieces of that from Caleb Battle in these first few games where it was like, oh man, he was really defending at a high level and really bringing it. Same with Ellis here and there. And so it's like, I think those two guys will have better defensive days. I'm not expecting either to be, guarding anyone, locking them up or anything like that. But I think, Muss will get this team when the games matter. I have a hard time believing Muss is just not going to get a good effort out of his team, which may sound very simple. Like, obviously they'll get up for the good games, but as we have learned with this team, these programs that we cover, Curtis, it's not always a guarantee that the team you cover is going to show up and play hard, even in a game that they have to win. So, big picture. And I looked at my close personal friend, Eric Musselman, in the eye last night, and I said, hey, coach, what gives you pause when you think big picture about this team? What are the areas that are really, and he mentioned exactly what you said. Can our guards stay in front of the guy they're guarding? Because, they're bigs. Makai had 5 shot blocks on Friday night. Trevin had 4 last night. And like, those guys can block shots, but it's not like Arkansas has elite rim protection, especially as the competition increases. I mean, the rim protection is going to be a little bit of an issue. Their verticality at the rim hasn't been great, which Musselman said. And, but I think, overall, I don't know if there's too much from last night's game that I'm looking at and I'm like, oh man, that's a huge deal. Like, especially Old Dominion making 11 threes. I mean, Muss talked about this as well, that like they've been elite in 3-point defense every year. I mean, that's like a staple. And so I have a hard time believing that like this is a thing that's just going to keep happening. Teams are just going to make 11 threes against Arkansas all the time. It's not something that we've seen happen in the past. And I am willing to chalk this up to a little bit of an anomaly, especially when you have a team like Old Dominion, who they admitted they weren't really prepared for them to be lighting it up from beyond the arc like that.
Yeah, it's to give you guys maybe a look behind the curtain a little bit at these press conferences that we go to. Like, it's just, if you're a media member, that if you get the microphone first in a post game with Eric Musselman, it doesn't matter what question you ask. Like, he's going to give you the full rundown of the game. And so I asked him for that essentially last night, and he gave it to me, and I had a follow up. And no sooner than I got the words, "You guys defended the 3 well in the preseason," he cut me off, man, and he was on it. 8 years. 8 years. We've done the same drills. We've done the same things. We've been the best 3-point defense in the country. Like, he was on it, man. It was hilarious. And he really had me going, because you're right. It was like one of those things where he was so ticked. Like, he just had one-liner after one-liner. And it got to a point where I think he could tell that he was cracking us up in press row. Like, we couldn't contain our laughter anymore. Because he's just a funny dude. And it got to a point where I think he realized it, and he almost got in a better mood as the press conference went along. Hilarious, man. Like, I do the post game, report card and player grades and all that after every game. He did it for me. It was the easiest work I ever had to do. He's like, transition defense, double F, 3-point defense, so bad it doesn't get a grade. Rebounding, triple F. He's just throwing out he
gave a few A's though. He gave a few A's.
He did. What did he give him? What did he give A's for? Ball security,
defending without fouling, and ball security were his A's. Yes.
And hey, he's right, because what was it? 15 assists to 4 turnovers. That's really, really good. And yeah, so there was some good and some bad, but man, defense, he's not happy, but I love it because he's not accepting in a win what you wouldn't accept in a loss. I mean, he's going to do everything he can to make those lessons learned. I'm sure, like, there's no doubt in my mind, like, those dudes are going to have the bricks in their hands at practice today. They're going to have the weighted vests on, the towels, whatever. He's going to get his message across, because if he doesn't, this is the type of stuff where look, we've seen it throughout the country already. You know, Villanova lost to Penn or whatever last night. We saw it with Michigan State and James Madison. Like, any team can get got if they don't bring it, especially in this new transfer portal era. Like, any opponent is capable of beating you on a given night. Arkansas has avoided that so far, but it hasn't necessarily been pretty along the way. You know, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like we tried really hard to not get too caught up in the exhibition success with this Arkansas team. But it was hard not to, because this group just seemed like they were so far ahead of schedule. The truth is, they're probably right where we should have expected them to be, 3 games into the season. And that's okay. I mean, I think they've shown what they're capable of, which I think is probably a Final Four. Like, I think they're that good. But they've also shown they have a lot of work to do before they're a finished product. So what are your thoughts on just kind of where Arkansas is at right now relative to maybe what your expectations were after that Purdue game, when we try to keep a level head, but it's tricky sometimes?
Well, if you think back to like even the best Musselman teams who were elite defensive teams. I mean, I'm thinking about that team with Justin Smith and Jalen Tate and all those boys. And even the next year, they gave up like 95 to Hofstra. They had some baffling defense. I mean, way worse than even the one we saw last night. Like, they had some struggles defensively all the way up until like late December. And so it's like, having struggles at this point in the season absolutely does not disqualify you from being a very good defensive team, because we saw these teams turn it up in March and stuff like that. So it's like I said, I would have had no problem in July if you had told me, hey, Arkansas is going to have a game where they just give up 76 points to Old Dominion, who's bad on offense. But it's like things like that happen. I wouldn't have been surprised. But like you mentioned, the Purdue game and the first 2 regular season games kind of threw us off the scent a little bit. And we're kind of like, hey, maybe this team's ahead of schedule defensively, which I think was still true in the moment. And, guys, it's tough. We're in a tough spot because it's like we're here to like break down what we see and we're supposed to react to what we saw. But we're not going to sit here and act like this is a finished product team and that like last night's performance is going to be indicative of how they play against anyone. I mean, they'll play better against Greensboro Friday, knowing that they got a good team coming in there. And, last night was a quick turnaround, as we like to say in the biz. But yeah, so I'm not like super concerned big picture, but I will say, I mean, it was a chink in the armor that I am not stunned to see, but I wasn't necessarily expecting to see it last night. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it was maybe just a little bit of a reality check, back down to earth, a little bit with this group, but trust the process, right? I mean, when they lose to Lipscomb or they start SEC play 0-3, relax a little bit. They'll be fine.
Great comment.
Salas Hogg off of our board. He chimes in and says, Andrew's a solid addition, but a monkey could do it. I don't know. I don't know if a monkey could do it or not.
Cool. We got good interactions. Where did that come from?
Oh man. Okay, so let's do this, because it has been interesting. Like we said, Arkansas, look, they're undefeated. The closest game they've had so far has been 9 points. But obviously there's a lot that Eric Musselman is concerned with or emphasizing or trying to send a message about, whatever. So let's break out the panic meter here, or maybe we should just say the worry meter, and decide where we're at on some of these things that Muss has been teeing off on. So we'll run through some of these things here. We'll go on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I ain't worried about it, 10 being this might be a concern here that's going to linger, and see where we're at. The first one, we'll start offensively, right? We'll start with the good stuff. I've seen shot selection brought up a number of times with this team. I'm going to withhold my thoughts on that first. Where are you at on the worry meter with shot selection?
So I'm not a 0, but I'm not that much higher than a 0. One, this team has been very efficient offensively through 3 games. Not the best competition, whatever you want to say. Like, okay. They've shown they can score in a lot of different ways. And, I feel like shot selection is an interesting thing because we all like to say words like that to act like we're smart. As Muss will tell you, like when you have super talented players who are proven at this level and have shown what they can do, you live with their shot selection a lot of times. When Caleb Battle wants to take a three off balance as he's coming off a inbound pass, you let him take that shot because he's Caleb Battle. When Devo Davis is feeling it and he's got 14 points, you let him take a pull-up mid-range jumper. It's just a thing that, it's just how it is. And, I feel like a lot of Arkansas's top guys have a good feel for that kind of stuff. With Ellis, I thought his shot selection last night was awesome.
Yeah.
Trevin Brazil, weirdly enough, I think his shot selection has been too good. I think I could, him and Caleb Battle, I feel like could afford to shoot a little bit more. So, I get it if people want to be upset, but I'm not really that concerned about that. I feel like this team seems like they can almost get whatever shot they want anytime they want. And, like even if it's a contested shot, like Trevin Brazil being 6'10" with his wingspan, is him shooting a three with someone closing out on him, is that a bad shot? Like is Tremont Mark, when he's got the hot hand, if he's taking pull-up mid-ranges, is that a bad shot? Like maybe, but I'm okay with it. I feel good about what this team can do offensively. And honestly, I feel good about what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think so too. I actually wasn't even going to include this on the list, but I was scrolling through Twitter or X or whatever last night, and I saw it 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, am I missing something here? I kind of went back and thought about it. Yeah, if I was to give something a 0, it would probably be this. So I mean, I'll give it a 1 or whatever, just to say I tried. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really been a problem with shot selection. Like, some of the mid-range pull-ups that they have been tough, but these are guys that have proven they could make it. Arkansas has a lot of explosive guys, offensively, who can create their own shot. But hey, outside of, a little stretch there against Gardner-Webb, I feel like they've really been sharing the ball well. Not too much hero ball. Your creators are creating, they're distributing it well. And they're connecting at a high clip. Like if you're shooting 50% from the field and 40% from 3-point range, and you got good volume and you're averaging 85 plus points per game, I don't have an issue with it. Moving on, one more offensively that maybe I do have an issue with that I really didn't expect. We touched on it earlier. Free throws, man. This is wild to me. I actually wrote a story about, like 5 things Arkansas needs to fix. I wrote it after the Gardner-Webb game on Sunday. And I wrote 5 things that I feel like they need to fix, and then 3 things that Muss has kind of been mentioning that I'm not really worried about. And I put free throws as something that I was not worried about. But they've missed 35 through 3 games. They've got guys with proven track records, and it's starting to trickle over to where it's not just maybe the guys who aren't going to be in the rotation that are skewing the stats. Like you're starting to see the Devos and the T Marks and the TBs struggle a little bit from the stripe. I know we're only 3 games in. I'm going to personally put that, I think, as a 5, which is quite a bit higher than where I was at before. Where are you at with it?
The 5 is the number I had, so I'm going to go down and go 4 because. Okay. After the first game, I believe we did the show, and I said, not a big deal. You had Bay Fall shoot like 9 free throws. You had Jalen Graham shoot a ton. And like you mentioned, it's no longer that situation. We can't, it's becoming a little bit of a weird thing now because you mentioned, like you said, Devo missed a couple I think it was like 3 for 6 or something like that. Mark missed 1, Battle missed 1, Brazil missed 1. It's like, those are weird things, but I think the law of averages is going to play up to an extent with some of those guys. I mean, especially a guy like Caleb Battle, who in the first couple games, I believe he shot 19 free throws, made a high clip. He was the only guy who was like high volume and high success rate. Throughout the season, I think those guys are going to rise to the top of the attempts chart, because I think him and Mark only combined for 3 or 4 last night. Brazil as well, only 3 or 4. So it's like, or I think he only had 2. So it's like, there's some room for some of those guys to start shooting more. When you have your better shooters shooting them, obviously you're going to make a higher percent. But yeah, Mekhi Mitchell and Jalen Graham shooting a lot of free throws early on is kind of skewing this a little bit. But it is weird. And last night's was the first time where I'm like, man, like they're just not making free throws when they, it was a little weird. But, free throws are kind of just one of those weird things where how are you going to get drastically better at it over the course of the season? I have a hard time believing that Devo is just going to be a 50% free throw shooter for the season. Caleb Battle, like I mentioned, he's going to knock down his. Tremont Mark's going to knock down his. Like once they get Jeremiah and Davenport a few more minutes, I think they'll be fine from that department. But it has been a little bit weird, and I would like to see them correct it pretty soon, just to make me feel like I'm not crazy.
Yeah, it's just always been such a staple of Eric Musselman teams. They're always one of the leading free throw attempts teams in the country, and for the first time last year. They shot it under 70% as a team, and they're kind of trending that direction again this season. Like I said, it's weird because most of the guys they added in the portal were like 80% or better at the free throw line. So I tend to think that they'll get it corrected, but To see him miss, a dozen per game through three, and then to not, come on here and say, oh no, it's not an issue. Well, it is. It's something they got to work on. So yeah, I think we're probably in a good spot there. 3-point defense. Now this one's interesting to me because, throughout the exhibitions, Arkansas was really solid defending the three. Through the first two games, I can't remember if it was 8 or 9 total I think it was 8 total that Arkansas allowed, and teams weren't even getting looks off. It was another thing. Like, they weren't even getting attempts up. But boy, Old Dominion figured it out, and that's not an Old Dominion team that shot it well through 2 games. I think they were 8 of 26 from 3 coming in. They were 11 of 24 last night. And we can say, oh, they were hot. They hit some contested ones. They had a ton of open looks too that they were knocking down. I know Eric Musselman, preaches that the Pat Riley closeouts, they do that a little bit differently on the perimeter than maybe other teams or maybe guys are used to. Where would you rate your concern level with the 3-point defense right now?
I'm going to go with 2 or 3. I'm right in between 2 or 3. I'll go 3. Here's why, Curtis. Should we trust the 8-year sample size combined with the first 3 or 4 games that we saw this team, or
it's the same drills, man?
Should we go with the 1-game sample size? Which, when you start comparing it, it's a little tough. But here's why I'm not too concerned about it. One thing we learned about Eric Musselman is, like, if there's a thing that his team has to prepare for, like, for example, if Greensboro happened to have a guy that takes 23s a game, you can bet your ass that Eric Musselman is going to make sure that guy does not take 23s and get open. You know what I mean? It's like they've shown they're very good at correcting the things they need to correct. Like the turnovers. It's kind of a little bit of a thing that started to flare up. They fixed it right away. They've done that in previous years. Defensively, we've seen 3-point defense struggle earlier in the year, and they get it corrected. Free throws are a little bit harder to correct, so we'll see if they do that. But I think that this staff has kind of earned the benefit of the doubt in terms of getting things like that cleaned up, especially when we're talking about 1 game. And, of course, Old Dominion, like we've mentioned, they weren't shooting it well coming into the game. That makes me think, and Must admitted as much last night, that it wasn't like this was a super priority coming into this game. It'd be one thing if they were like, hey, we got to stop the 3, and then they gave up 11 threes. You'd be like, oh, wow, there's a little bit of an issue. I'm not quite there yet. I've never heard Must say this. He literally admitted that one of their players was not on their scouting report. The guy, I forget his name, was Caesar, something Caesar.
Yeah,
he had like 18 points in 15 minutes off the bench. Must was like, we really weren't even prepared for that guy. And so it's like, that's one thing that if you're counting on an Eric Musselman team to be underprepared in the future, you shouldn't. I don't think that's going to be much of a problem. And I'd be surprised if we don't see that, correct in a big way here soon.
Yeah, I swear we didn't collaborate on this beforehand, but that's kind of where I was at too. Maybe the 2 to 3 range, because I really think the struggles guarding the arc last night were a direct reflection of some other issues that they have. For one, we talked about the dribble penetration, the inability to keep the ball in front of them. Hey, when guards able to get to the teeth of the defense and collapse it, you're spraying out for rhythm threes, and teams are going to knock that down. You correct that, they're not getting as many open looks. And then the same thing, which kind of leads us to our next one here. They gave up a dozen offensive rebounds. And a lot of those, Old Dominion's going up, grabbing them, kicking it out, knocking down a 3. It was like second and third shots in a possession that they were knocking down. Rebounding is interesting to me because Arkansas is long. They've got an athletic bunch, but they're not that physically imposing. Like the most physical presence they have is Makai at 6'10", 240. But they're struggling on the glass right now. We're out rebounded overall. I think they were -4 against Old Dominion, gave up 12 offensive rebounds, 16 second chance points. Rebounding, my concern level right now, my worry meter, I'm going to go 8. Because I think this is a problem that is going to linger with this team throughout the course of the season. There are things they can do to work on it. But I do think this is a legitimate issue. Where are you at with it?
Once again, you stole my number. I'm going to go 7 just because I can't say 8. And guys, Curtis isn't lying. I was driving him home last night and I was like, hey, we got to stop talking about this basketball team. We got a show to do tomorrow. We'll save it. We'll save the goods for the show. So we really didn't talk much about this, but I'm kind of, that's one where my sunshine pumping ends here. I think that's a real issue. And I think that here's why it's a real issue, Curtis. They've been playing multiple big men's like consistently. Like last night, it was like the 9:50 mark where they finally went small and had Trevin at the 5, and we got to see a couple of minutes of it. And I liked what I saw, but they've been trying to play multiple big men and kind of emphasize that. And the rebounding was a huge deal going into that Alcorn State game, as we joked about. So it's like I see less. I'm less. I'm less sure that that's something they can easily fix, and it's just more of like, oh, they'll figure it out, because not a ton of proven guys, especially on the defensive end, in that front court. And so that's an issue where the answer is a lot more murky there. Me personally, my solution would just be go small. Like, I think it reminds me a little bit of Arkansas football. And before anyone freaks out, let me say this. Arkansas football had this issue where they couldn't run the ball. So they were like, hey, let's bring 5 tight ends who are all bad onto the field and see if we can get that physicality rather than just spreading it out and hoping they can clear things up. I think Arkansas is going to have to make a decision where, instead of saying, hey, let's try and match these teams by bringing in these big men that we're not even sure we like, just force teams to guard you. And I think you'd never want to do what your opponent is begging you to do. And I just have a hard time believing there's SEC coaches who are like, dang it, Mekhi Mitchell's in the game. Dang it. But whereas I think when you have Mark and Devo and Battle and Ellis and Brazil all out there, I think opposing coaches are like, crap, I'm going to have, they're looking at their bench like, wait a minute, how do I match up with this? It gives your opponent a little bit more problems. And so Musselman was seen pretty upset with Brazil defensively on one play when they went to that small ball lineup. But I really want to see it. I just want to see it just so I can feel like I'm not crazy and just see what happens. And if they get out rebounded by 30, maybe it happens. It's like, all right, we got to play these 2 big men. But Muss has been talking a lot about Brazil at the 3. I don't understand where that's coming from, but I'm not going to pretend like I know more than Eric Musselman. This dude knows more basketball than he's forgotten more basketball than I know, I guess is the term I'm looking for here. But I think that I'm definitely concerned about that front court, because I just mentioned they need to go small, but it's like, what if that doesn't work? Then you really do have to play Mekhi and Graham or Lawson for 40 minutes and just hope that other teams don't expose them.
Yeah, if Trevin Brazil can turn into a competent SEC 3, then the lottery hype is definitely real, I think, for that guy. Yeah, I think a direct correlation with the rebounding is, the physicality, and that's really what Muss has been preaching about so much. And that kind of goes hand in hand with rim protection. On one hand, you look at the stat sheet and they're getting a ton of block shots, but it's kind of like he said after the Gardner-Webb game, well, it's either a block or a layup. And so I like the fact that they're, altering shots and coming up with blocks. That's great, Brazil, Mekhi, whoever. But is there a guard that Arkansas has played so far who has been, skittish or deterred from driving to the rim and trying to finish on the trees? I don't think so. And so that's something they've really got to work on, is holding their ground and being a little bit more physical underneath and just moving your feet. We've talked about it a lot, like with Mekhi, he's their most physically imposing guy in there. But man, if he has to take one step over and help to stop a drive, it's not going to happen. So he's got cinder blocks for shoes. And so that's an issue right now. And so if you're going to apply a ton of ball pressure and you're going to gamble and try to generate turnovers, you got to be able to erase that stuff on the back end. You can't be getting finished on by guards. So that, physicality / rim protection for me is probably another area, along with rebounding, where I'd be higher up on that worry meter, maybe a 7 to 8. Although I do think there's more room for improvement there, maybe than the rebounding area.
Well, and one more thing with the rebounding, Muss has talked about this a little bit too, of their guards this year, like Ellis and Devo. Devo rebounds well for his position, but like Ellis and Battle, it's not like those are, glass cleaners necessarily, where Arkansas's had a little bit of that with guys like Anthony Black, Jalen Tate, who are kind of able to overcome any of their deficiencies down low because your guards are rebounding at such a high level. And I think guys like Mark and Devo are going to rebound at a decent clip, but it's not like Arkansas is getting that support that they're used to from their backcourt in the rebounding department. So, I think it puts a little bit more pressure on this front court. And, I feel like I'm a broken record talking about this small ball lineup, but I feel like those are the questions that we're going to have when we start seeing it more, is like, okay, this rebounding has been kind of iffy, and this rim protection, what's it going to look like when it's literally just Brazil down there? Or like, are these guys going to kind of rise and defend and rebound high enough to make this small ball lineup a reasonable option? And so it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of overcome what I agree is one of their actual real concerns.
All right, let's move on to the rotation a little bit, because Muss has said time and time again, hey, not playing 13 guys. Well, finally, we had a game that was close and competitive to where you could really see that rotation be trimmed down and maybe get a better idea of where things stand. And then there were 6, man. I mean, Ellis, Devo, Tremont Mark, TB, Mekhi Mitchell, and Caleb Battle. Like that's who they rolled with in that second half. And, outside of that, I think we're about where we expected to be, where there's a few other guys who on any given night could play that big role as a seventh or eighth man. Chandler Lawson starts. He played 6 minutes. Jalen Graham got his one rotation. We never saw him again. Is that familiar? Because it is to me. And then, I think Jeremiah Davenport is an interesting guy. Like if he's knocking down a bunch of threes, he's probably going to play more. But with guys in foul trouble last night, he had an opportunity to get extended minutes, and he clanked one off the top of the backboard. He smoked a dunk. And so maybe he didn't fully take advantage of those minutes there. But like you mentioned earlier, but I thought he did some good things defensively. He's rebounding pretty well at his position. But tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like there's kind of that line forming with the top 6, and you've got those other guys just trying to figure out the last spots here and there.
I agree 100%. Isn't it kind of hilarious? The last time we did this show, we were coming off of the Alcorn State game where Mekhi Mitchell played 4 minutes, and it was like, man. And now all of a sudden, like we've mentioned his name 30 times in the first 30 minutes. It's like if anyone just watches our show with no context, they're like, man, Mekhi must have done something crazy, which he kind of did. But I agree. Those 6 guys seem pretty much. I mean, those are your locks right there. Again, weirdly enough, Mekhi hasn't started any of these games. That might change here soon. But yeah, I think he's more of a lock than those other 2 quote unquote big guys that we're talking about. And Davenport's the interesting one to me. Last week I said, don't be on the wrong side of the history with Jeremiah Davenport. We've had a setback in that department, but I still am going to remain adamant. Don't be on the wrong side of history. This guy is a productive college basketball player. He's a streaky shooter, but he is a high level, high volume guy that kind of changes the way your team plays offense when he's in the game. And, I mentioned it earlier. I really liked what I saw from him defensively. And, his size is he's bigger than I kind of thought he was, or at least longer. He looks like he holds up well out there, and we'll see if that changes whenever the competition increases. But I've been encouraged with what I've seen from him in other areas. It literally just comes down, he's got to make those threes. And if that's our biggest concern with Jeremiah Davenport, I think we're going to be all right. I mean, we've both seen this guy light it up plenty just in the time he's been on campus at practice and other things. And he's got a pretty proven track record as a shooter. So I have a hard time believing he's just going to be riding pine all year long. Interesting that Joseph Pinion was a DMP coach's decision last night, if I'm not mistaken. So we kind of talked about that battle of who it's going to come down to, and really neither guy has been anywhere close to a lock for the rotation. But I think Davenport's probably the most likely to, at least outside of that top 6, to solidify his spot here in the next couple of weeks. But Jalen Graham, weirdly enough, I feel bad for Jalen Graham because it's like I haven't been like displeased with what I've seen from him. I felt like he's had some good moments, some good, defensively is where the concern is, obviously. But it hasn't been like a huge disaster or anything, but it's just kind of the way it's shaked out. And it feels like every game there's going to be at least one of those big men that just gets frozen out of the rotation completely. And last night it was kind of him and Chandler with the way Mekhi was playing.
Yeah, I think with Graham, it was almost a product of like the way the game was going. Like if rebounding and physicality were like the big things that were standing out, it's tough for Graham, even if he's not really struggling in those areas, because that's kind of his MO, right? And so, if Mekhi is giving him a double-double or whatever, it's almost like the minutes just become limited. And that's kind of what we talked about is, it's a situation where, no, Jalen Graham is not out of shape, by the way. I see that comment pop up there. But it is one of those situations to where, it was Chandler Lawson and then it was Graham and now it's Mekhi. Truthfully, it's going to be probably a game-by-game situation where they're just going to have to find the hot hand there until, like Andrew said, they figure out that playing Trevor Brazil at the 5 and rolling with small ball is the way to go. We'll see when it happens. UNC Greensboro on Friday. This is an interesting game. A really, really sneaky good mid-major. They play Vanderbilt tonight, Tuesday night at Vanderbilt. I think they're going to go win there straight up. A lot of returning talent from that team. They can shoot it. They've got a really good big man. They were beating Arkansas by 5 at halftime last year, and it was a single-digit game. I think 65-58 was the final. It was a little weird. That was the game Trevor Brazil went down. So we'll see about the emotions for him. But this is a tough game, one that you certainly can't be looking ahead to this trip to the Bahamas. You got to take care of business. Should Arkansas be on upset alert here?
They should be on upset alert. They're not going to get upset. Let me clarify. They're not going to lose this game because of all the reasons that you just mentioned. Eric Musselman has had this game. If you know Eric Musselman, you know he's had this game circled for a minute. Like, this is the classic trap game, classic, oh, we're about to go to Atlantis and we got one more home game. This is a step up in competition from what they've seen these first 3 games. And I you know, Old Dominion looked good last night. I feel confident in saying Greensboro is going to be far and away the best team they've seen through the first 4 games. And like you mentioned, Trevin Brazile gets injured in this game. You kind of wonder, I mean, you know, Bob Holt, our guy Bob Holt, asked about it last night. I wonder what that's going to be like for him mentally. It'll be interesting to see. I bet we see a good version of Trevin Brazile, which we tend to see 99% of the time. But yeah, I think I'm so fired up for this game. It's gonna be Friday night. We can talk about the crowd later. We'll save that one for later. But it's a perfect test. Like, I wouldn't be thrilled if Arkansas were playing Duke right now on Friday. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that big of a step up in competition, but this is like the perfect appetizer for what Arkansas is going to see down the stretch. Veteran team, a team that has had success against you a little bit before. You know how dangerous they are. This is going to be a perfect like barometer to see where Arkansas is at this time of year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that game Friday night.
Well, let's talk about the crowds, because, you know, through the first 3 games here, they've been light, I think, by Bud Walton Arena standards, and I get it.
That's the term I like to use. It's late arriving. It's not a bad
Late
crowd.
arriving, sure. And I get it. Like, they haven't been playing the sexiest opponents here, but it was announced as a season sellout. And I think that's the thing. Like, if all the tickets are sold, you'd like to see probably more butts in the seats. And I think that's why people are getting a little bit misconstrued with Muss when he's talking about the give back system that they have, where they can redistribute tickets to teachers and first responders for, maybe season ticket holders who can't make it to every game, just to get more butts in the seats. What are your thoughts on the crowd so far? Because for me, I guess I look at it from a different lens, from the standpoint of Arkansas is a top 15 team in the country that's had 3 consecutive second weekend appearances in the NCAA tournament. Arkansas is the ticket. Arkansas is the draw. To me, it doesn't matter who they're playing. Maybe you would think there'd be some larger crowds there. I get it. Like, it's not going to be sold out on a weeknight against Old Dominion, but I've been at every home game for the last 4 years now. And these early crowds, these have been more like Christmas break crowds, in my opinion, as opposed to, maybe some of those early games that, like, the Northern Iowas from a couple years ago, and, and November games when people were excited about this team. And I just feel like there were probably a few thousand more people in the stands then.
I agree 100%. And I agree that Arkansas is the draw. I don't think there should be a, like, well, who are they playing? Are they playing a top team? Well, it's like, you have one of the best teams in the country. You have an iconic, awesome, top-of-the-line coach at the peak of his powers. You've got, maybe this might be the best team Muss has had. You can make an argument this might be the best team in the last 30 years for Arkansas. Are they? I don't know. But people should go to the games and find out, if you ask me. That's kind of my thing. And look, like you said, it's not about just people should be flying from across the country to go see this team on Tuesday night. But I'm just saying, if you're a season ticket holder and you have tickets to the game and, you're not able to make it or whatever, like Muzza said, turn in those tickets. But also, it's there should be some type of incentive for season ticket holders to attend games. Call me crazy. I think that people who buy tickets should just go to the games they buy tickets for. But I get it if you live out of state, or you live in Little Rock, or whatever it is. Because, I grew up in Central Louisiana. I wasn't able to go to a ton of games. I can count on at 2 hands the amount of Arkansas basketball games I went to in Bud Walton before I worked here. But I do think I think this team is, like you said, a draw. I think it should be a draw. And I think that's why you've seen Eric Musselman try to do some of these things, like having the pregame routine and trying to improve the atmosphere the best they can. And I saw John Williams tweeting about this last night. The Hog Wild band this year, I swear they've taken a step up. I don't know what it is. The Hog Wild band this year is cooking, dude. I even leaned over to Grant last night. I was like, dude, this band is this is one of the best bands they've had. And we're obviously
better than the DJ situation.
Way better than the DJ situation.
Way better.
No disrespect to DJ Derek, but I feel like those songs that band's playing, it's a fun atmosphere, and it's just a fun place to be. I look forward to going there literally every time. But yeah, it's very interesting to see. I'm a fight fan, so I view everything through those lens of why are people showing up? When Conor McGregor fights, it doesn't matter who he's fighting. People are going to show up. People are going to see, and I get it. It's not exciting to go see Gardner Webb, but it's I think I'm a big believer in the more you put into something, the better and more rewarding it is. So it's part of me really enjoys being able to go to these games every time. And obviously I get paid to do it. So it's a little different, but I think, some fans should kind of view it through that lens of hey, this might realistically be the best team Arkansas's had in a long time. If it's not, it's close to it. Just be a part of the ride, you know? And I feel like the more you go to these games, the more you're in that atmosphere, the more intimate it feels, and the better the overall experience is for just watching the season overall and watching it unfold. Where better to do it than Bud Walton Arena, man? It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of interesting. Like we've been talking for 40 minutes, and it's kind of been like one big vibe check for this Arkansas basketball team. Look, they're fine. All right. They've got things to work on. These are good problems to have in the football facility right now. Those are bad problems to have. And so I saw a post on our board, and I got to thinking about this, like with the situation with football right now. And I know this is a basketball podcast, so we're going to keep it related, but you know, Sam Pittman he's like a CEO type of head coach, right? He's the game manager type. He's not calling the plays, run the defense. Obviously he's forgotten more about football than I'll ever know, but I can't help but wonder, and I want to throw this at you. Like if all conditions were the same, like the staff, the players, the schedule, everything, what would Arkansas football's record be if Eric Musselman was in charge? Like if he was the head coach? I'm gonna set the over under for you at 5.5 wins. Be honest.
And I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going over on it, and I'm going to take you game by game. They start 2-0, which they did under Sam Pittman. I'm going to assume they do under Muss. They beat BYU at home. Eric Musselman is undefeated as the Arkansas Razorbacks head coach against non-conference home games at home.
And it doesn't matter if it's in Reynolds Razorback Stadium or if it's in Bud.
You can't argue the math. You cannot argue the math, Curtis. He's 36-0 against non-conference teams at home. He would improve to, I guess it would be like 38, 39-0 with a win over BYU. I think if I were coaching that game, Arkansas beats BYU too, but that's another point. That BYU team sucks. I've been watching them all year. They suck, dude. So if anyone's looking back and they're like, well, that team sucks, dude. But anyways, they beat LSU at Baton Rouge, and this is why they beat them. LSU played their worst game of the year against Arkansas, and if you've watched LSU this year, you know that's true. That was the worst half of football LSU's played under Brian Kelly. I mean, that first half against Arkansas, Jaden Daniels was missing throws or turning the ball over, and Arkansas was down in the red zone like 5 times. Like, I'm counting on Muss to get the pieces there, show up in a big environment. And then at that point, I guess they would be A&M. I'll give them a loss there. They lost by like 2 touchdowns, and frankly, that game wasn't as close as the score indicated. I'll give them a loss there. Bama would be next, or Ole Miss? Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
I think they beat Ole Miss, mostly because we were there anyway. We were there. Yeah, they almost beat them anyway. We were there in person. Ole Miss sleptwalked through that game 100%. It was a good environment and a good atmosphere, but I believe they had just played either Bama or somebody the week before. So it was like Arkansas caught Ole Miss at a really good time. And Eric Musselman, I feel like I see him getting up for a game against Lane Kiffin. I think it would be a PR dream having those two guys coach against each other, just 2 quirky dudes throwing weird stuff around. They lose to Alabama only because if Eric Musselman had been coach, if all these things that I'm saying happen, then Arkansas is like 5-2, 6-2. I think Bama gets up for that game and beats them. You know, I think they beat Mississippi State at home. I don't really think I need to delve into that too much.
Nope, enough said.
And I think we're already at 6 wins, so it's like we can argue about the rest, but I feel like it feels like they win 6 games easily if Eric Musselman is in charge of this football team. Yeah, which he might be. He might be. Who knows? I mean, he has not come out publicly and said he is not a candidate for any job opening. So,
right. We'll I mean, I think if he was ever to go to a sport that wasn't basketball, he'd probably make a great baseball manager. I know that's kind of his passion. But football, yeah. I mean, Muss is he's a master motivator. And he's elite in terms of preparation, and it's not going to change regardless of what the sport is. Like he's going to have his guys motivated and as prepared as possible, regardless of the situation. He's going to put them in a position to succeed. And I really believe it's not just conjecture. Like I really believe that they'd be bowl eligible right now if he was in charge of the football team. Now, here's the thing: if Hunter Yurachek hears this and decides to make the move, well, first of all, he should give us credit.
He's writing it down right here. He's like,
yeah. Second of all, Arkansas basketball, then they'd have a job to fill. And so it's crazy because
are you sure Muss wouldn't take both jobs?
If anybody could do it, it would be him, right?
Hey, I want to touch on this comment real quick because this guy says you could merge. I want to clarify. We're keeping Pittman on staff and he's coaching the O-line. That's what's happening in that situation. If Muss is there, Muss likes Pittman. He's not just gonna steal his job. He's gonna keep him on board for vibes and coach up that O-line, which needed some coaching. But my dream, my goal in my career, the only reason I'm in this business, I have one goal. I want to sit down with Dave Van Horn and Eric Musselman and just riff, just talk to them, get there, just bounce ideas off of them, hear what they tell stories off air completely. I just want to hear from those two guys, and just because both of those guys are at the top of their professions, like clear proven winners, but they're so different in so many ways. So I would love to just like kind of watch them interact for like 2 hours and just talk to each other about different things, compare and contrast. That's my one and only career goal.
I mean, you would leave that room a smarter and better man, no doubt. I mean, that would be incredible. You see it sometimes.
I would develop a work ethic if I hung out with those guys for enough.
It's incredible, but it is wild. It's an unfortunate situation with football. You want to see those guys succeed, but already we're talking about potential coaching changes. Boy, who would be on the hot board? And so listen, if Hunter makes the move and he poaches Muss and sends him over to football, what is this place going to do if Eric Musselman's not coaching Arkansas basketball? Like, we're not speaking that into existence here, but hypothetically, like if we were in this situation and we're having to look at potential, basketball hot boards, where do we start? And I know you've got some thoughts on that. I got a couple too, but who would be at the top of your board if Arkansas was in a position where they had to replace Eric Musselman?
Clubber Tang starts and ends.
Knew it. Let's go.
Clubber Tang's the man, dude. I'm into him. He made Desi Sills look cool last year. He took dude, that Kansas State team last year, if you really watched them, was not that good of a team. Well, they win like 30 games. Like they had a great year last year. I didn't think that team. I thought that team was like substantially worse than Arkansas, who wasn't even that good last year. Like every time I watched them play, I just loved it. Like they played so hard for that dude, and I'm a huge fan of him. I'm sure you have some cooler names in mind.
No, I mean, Jerome Tang would absolutely be at or very near the top of my list. I mean, his energy is unreal. And really for him to do it, he was basically a career assistant, right? And for him to do what he did in that first year at Kansas State, and they're going to be an NCAA tournament team again. I love that dude's energy. I think that would be awesome. I really like TJ Otzelberger at Iowa State. I mean, he's come over from a mid-major, and that's kind of Arkansas is a little bit different of a brand in basketball on a national scale, but it's kind of a similar situation where Iowa, Arkansas, it's an interesting place to recruit to. He always has a hell of a team. Those guys defend. He's intense. He's young. He's energetic. I like him a lot, but I want to throw one at you. How do we feel about reclamation projects and second chances? Because I feel like Chris Beard is going to be a really hot name in the coming years.
I'm going to stay away from that one, and I'm going to politely decline. I'll hear him. I'll sit in on the meeting if he wants to sell me on it, but I think I'm going to stay away from Chris Beard. But I agree. Ole Miss is going to be sneaky, man. Those games are not going to be fun. Anyone that has to play against, I haven't watched them play this year. I'm trying to act like I know what I'm talking about, but those Ole Miss in a couple years, even this year, like they're going to be defending at such a high level. Those like Tuesday night games in Oxford are going to be sneaky. There's going to be a lot of teams who do not enjoy playing against Chris Beard's teams, and I did not enjoy watching Arkansas play against a Chris Beard coach team last year when I got the chance to do it.
That was not a lot of fun. Not a lot of fun at all. What do you think the conditions would need to be for like an internal hire, like for Keith Smart, Ronnie Brewer?
I'm so glad you said this, Curtis, because I'll tell you who's number 2, right behind Tang on my list, Ronnie Brewer. Bring him home. By the way, credit to HawgStats.com for alerting me yesterday. Ronnie Brewer, the last Arkansas player to score 3 straight 20-point games to start a season. Caleb Battle had a chance to do it last night, but ended up at 13. Ronnie Brewer's the man. I don't know if we're ready to give him the keys to the Ferrari yet, but that's kind of like what I'm secretly hoping for, is that in like 15 years, Ronnie Brewer is the head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. Ronnie Brewer, come on the pod.
Yeah, exactly. Come on the pod. We will promote you.
Pitch us. We'll help you.
No, I agree. I think that would be awesome. Like for me, it'd almost be like the perfect, Arkansas gets back to the Final Four. They win the national championship. Muss is like, man, I did my job. I'm good. I'm headed to San Diego. I'm going to put my feet in the sand.
Here you go, here's the keys.
Here's the keys to the Cadillac, baby. Let's go. I think that would be awesome.
I want
Okay.
to tell a quick story about Ronnie Brewer, though. I've told you this story off air like probably 20 times, but when I was a kid, so I was born in 97. So I was like 8, 9, 7, 8, 9, 10 when Ronnie Brewer was at Arkansas. So kind of like the perfect first athlete for me to really be a huge fan of. Darren McFadden unseated him like 2 years later as my favorite Hog athlete. But I broke my arm when I was 4 years old and had a really horrible injury where my growth plate was shattered and my elbow still looks weird. I don't feel like showing it on air because everyone's going to make fun of me. But Ronnie Brewer, as you know, also broke his arm and it affected his jump shot and like all these things. And so when I was a kid, I was like, this is the coolest guy ever. Like the Arkansas's best player having a broken arm was the coolest thing that could happen for a kid that loved Arkansas who had a broken arm. So I was like, Ronnie Brewer was the first athlete that was like my favorite athlete. Like I had a poster of him and everything. Like, so I will always be partial to Ronnie Brewer. And, but if he comes on the pod, I will not tell him that.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's get to some comments, man, and get out of here. Polar Express is coming on shortly, so I want to make sure to catch that.
Wait, but which room are you watching it in? The real one or the fake one?
I don't know. Whichever one has a TV. Daddy Daughter Playlist says our effort isn't hungry. The teams we play are hungry, and it shows. I find it fascinating because it is a situation where, and this isn't new to this year, but Arkansas is a program that's got a target on its back. Like you're going to get every team's best shot because of the success you've had over the last few years. But it's not success that's been shared by everybody on this roster. I mean, they've got returners in Devo, Kai, Brazil, whatever. But you've also have guys who've been in much different situations. How weird must it be for Ellis to have won 4 games last year where everybody's just like, dude, we're going to get the walk-ons involved in this one, to go into Arkansas where it's like people are coming at your throat for 40 minutes trying to notch that signature wins. Same thing for guys like Battle and others on the team. Tremont Mark, I guess, would be the exception. But yeah, I think there's something to be said for these new guys kind of making that adjustment because it's just a completely different vibe than maybe what they've experienced elsewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, Hungry Dog runs faster. I have no doubt that Old Dominion was more fired up to play that game than Arkansas. But I agree with the points you're making where it's like, are you sure Ellis is just looking over these teams? He's not taking, especially because you got a lot of these guys like this, their last year of college basketball. And that kind of brings me back to why everyone needs to be like going to these games and like really like, I know it's hard to get invested in every non-conference game, but it's like this team is its own team. It's its own identity. This is a completely different roster almost. Like a lot of these guys, this is their first chance to win at a high level. And so it's like, it's really cool to watch them get that opportunity. And but I think big picture, yes, I think there's a little bit. I mean, I remember, I guess was it Alcorn or Gardner Webb? I was getting food before the game, and I just hear a roar coming through the media room, like right outside the media room. It was Gardner Webb. Yeah, they were fired up going into that game, and Gardner Webb came out pretty hot in that game. But I do think like that target on your back aspect is a big part of why some of these games are more interesting than we anticipate.
We got James M. He says, I can hear it just like last year. They aren't going to make it in March. They're falling apart. Hate to see what is said when we lose a game.
Who's saying that?
Relax, man. Hey, listen, if Eric Musselman is going to go to back-to-back press conferences and tee off on the things that his team needs to work on, we're going to talk about it on the show. But yeah, again, like we said earlier, this stuff with Arkansas basketball right now, these are good problems to have. Like this is a legitimate, Final Four potential having team. They're just not a finished product yet, right? They've got things to clean up just like everybody else. They're 3 games into the season. But to your point, you're 100% right. When they lose a game, people are going to be going off the deep end about it. And it's like I said earlier, trust the process. When they go lose in Simmons Bank Arena in December, or if they're 1-3 to start SEC play, we've seen it over and over and over. Like that's just the way these teams operate under Muss. By the end of the year, they're going to be just fine. And I don't think that this team is going to, kind of dig themselves a hole that they have in the past that they've got to dig out of. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to get that bad. They're going to lose some games. Sure. Are they going to be really, really good? Yes, absolutely.
As a wise man once said, while seated in a Pluckers in Austin, Texas, they're going to be fine, Curtis. They're going to be fine.
I remember that.
That was one of the most heated moments of our friendship after that Texas blowout. The whole ride home, we were just talking about that team, but man, I agree. Like they're going to be fine.
Yeah, they'll be all right. Let's see what we have here. Warrior Way 22, one of our guys over on the message board. Great basketball poster. Good to see Devo and Ellis step up with Mark and battle in early foul trouble. There's always an adjustment period defensively for Must teams. They'll figure it out and turn a corner soon. Yeah, I thought Devo and L were awesome. I was kind of going back and forth between those two guys for the star of the game and the story that we do. I think it's nice to see Devo get going offensively a little bit. And from a scoring standpoint, right? Because he does this weird thing where he doesn't like to shoot early in the years, but he's been so good taking care of the ball. I thought it was a really great comment from Muss last night where he's like, we know Devo plays with such a flair. He's a showman. He gets into his bag, but now he's doing it and he's under control and he's not making some of those mistakes that we've seen in the past that make us want to rip our hair out. It's only 3 games in, but it seems like maybe he's matured from that standpoint. But yeah, I thought him and L were awesome in the backcourt last night.
Yeah, the Threebo fans were sick, or the haters were sick last night. The Threebo haters were just fuming. But yeah, that's a great point. And I talked earlier about like what the floor for this offense or this team is. When you have, Caleb Battle and Tremont Mark getting 2 fouls as soon as they enter the game, and you have some of these things not going. Trevin Brazil has 0 points in the first half. Like, any variable that could have gone against Arkansas pretty much went against them last night, including their opponent making 11 threes, and they won by what, 8, 7, 9? Like, it's like it was still a pretty comfortable win that they didn't really have to like fight too hard for. So it's like this is kind of what I think of, and I'm like, this team's floor is insanely high.
We got Zach Van. He says that the team has 8 or 9 guys that could get you double-digit points on any given night. Defense and rebounding will get better. Seasons early, Muscle get them lined out. Agree with all that. I do want to touch on the first point, though, of them having 8 or 9 guys who could score double digits. That's true. After that Gardner-Webb game, Muss was like, I think our depth took a step back, and they did to a degree because they didn't play that well. But it is worth noting, like we were talking about the rotation a few minutes ago, and we kind of outlined the top 6 and how they're, maybe there's kind of a line forming right there. But guys right below that cut line, if you look at it, it's like, Jeremiah Davenport. Yeah, like those guys could absolutely get you 20 on a given night. So
and have in their careers.
Yeah, exactly. They can and they have. That's 100% right. Like they're going to really have their moments. And so, when we look at this now and we're saying, okay, there's some definition, it's becoming a little bit more clear with those top 6. It's just like any of Muss's other teams. Like he's gonna ride those guys for heavy minutes. Other dudes are going to have opportunities, and if they come in and take advantage of it, they're going to have big nights. I think Davenport, Graham, those are guys that you're going to see on multiple occasions this year that'll give you some really good stuff.
Credit to Zach Van for basically just hearing us talk for an hour and then just summing it up into like 3 sentences.
Yeah,
that's pretty much our whole show. That was our entire show, bro.
Let's see, what do we got through here? Let me scroll through. Oh, I like this. Our man Honcho. To be honest, Kamani would do this team good just because he'd out rebound everyone. Yeah, that is the one thing, last year, I guess from a sense, Arkansas's kind of run it back with their front court, but the 2 guys that they've lost is Makani. We could combine them if we want to, Kamani and Mikkel. But those were your 2 like bruisers. If you really need to bring somebody in to pound, to be physical, to kind of be that enforcer. Who is that guy this year? Do they have him?
Devo Davis, is he the guy?
He might be.
I think he might be. And like, look, as far as Devo's mentality and his aggression and all that stuff, yeah, he fits the bill perfectly. Tremont Mark, I feel like, is one of those guys who has, crazy enough, Caleb Battle is not the physical rebounder that we're talking about, but in terms of just dog, if we're going by just pure dog levels, those guys, I love the mental makeup of this team, and that's part of why like all these issues we're discussing don't really like keep me up at night too much, because I trust this team. Like we're talking about, Muss was talking about Ellis as a guy who's like constantly coming to the staff and asking for feedback on what he can do better. And it's like, I think all these guys are kind of built that way. You might not think of them as bruisers or enforcers, but I think mental makeup and like just toughness, I think all these guys have it. And so I think it'll show up. But I think Makai might have to be the guy who just uses up those 5 fouls and throws some elbows. Might have to be him. Lawson Blake, maybe?
Yeah, why not?
Enforcer.
Why not? Get in there and mix it up a little bit. A couple more here, and we'll get out of here. Kingsley, he says, I get a visceral reaction just thinking about losing Coach Muss. Listen, we are not advocating for this. All right.
Well, you don't lose him. He just coaches the football team. What do you? You don't lose them.
Right.
You just have to watch. You only get to watch him coach 13 games a year instead of 35.
Embrace it again. Like if anybody could pull the double duty, it would be him because
And like we said, he might coach both teams. So yeah, worst case scenario, he coaches the football team. That's it.
I absolutely love it. Another one here, Cedric White. During the regular season, the go-to guy changes, but who's going to be that consistent guy in March? I don't know, man. I think if I had to put my finger on somebody, it'd probably be Battle because he just seems like a guy who he's just unfazed by anything. And you put the ball in his hands in any situation. And the one thing that is guaranteed is like, he is not going to shy away from going and trying to get you a bucket, whether it's a good shot or a bad shot, up 30, down 30. He does not care. Like he will go get you one. That's probably where I'd be with that. But at the same time, he took a couple ill-advised shots late in that game last night, and he wasn't on the floor with the closing lineup the last few minutes. Could be a number of guys. Who is it going to be consistently? Will they even have the guy on this team? What do you think?
Well, I want to push back slightly on the idea that the go-to guy can't change throughout March. One, because I feel like just with all the great teams, I feel like we've seen that. We've seen different guys have to step up and make shots. And during the regular season, we mentioned that it's gonna change. But I mean, just think about it. The Purdue game, it was Tremont Mark. He was kind of the guy that down the stretch they needed those buckets from, and they went and got him. In I guess it was the Alcorn State game in the first 2 games of the year. It was Battle, who was the go-to scorer and the guy they went to down the stretch to knock down those free throws. And you saw a little bit of a collection of all these guys. I think Brazil is still one that, like, I know I sing his praises a lot on the show, but it's like I still think there's going to be plenty of matchups where, and even in March, where it's like some teams just are not going to have answers for him. And I think we'll see that a little bit. But I also think there's going to be plenty of times where maybe teams with smaller guards, I think that's when you'll see Tremont Mark really thrive as a lead ball handler, especially down the stretch. But I think Battle is probably the safe answer just because every time he takes a shot, I'm like, that's going in. And I said it earlier, I kind of want him to shoot more, man. I want to see him just take 20 shots and just see what happens. I mean, at the current rate we're going at, that would equal like 47 points or something like that. So I'm down to see it. But yeah, I think that Battle is one of those guys that's kind of like, y'all take this for a little bit. I'll find where I need to fit in, and when they need him, he's there, man. I love watching. And we're talking about shot selection. Who has better shot selection so far this year than Caleb Battle? Which, by the way, hard to have for a 6'3" or 6'4", 6'5" guard who's like not like a crazy athlete that's going to be able to get to the rim at will. Like he's getting these are like quote unquote tough shots, but he's getting exactly to every spot he wants, and he's firing off the exact shot he wants. And so I think Battle's probably the safe answer, though. We'll go with him.
Yeah, Battle shooting that, off of the baseline inbounds, the fall away three from the corner. Shoot it all you want, dude. Like take that shot every possession. I don't care. I love it. With Trevin Brazil, and you mentioned this the other day, like it's nice to see him getting involved more in ball screen action because really you can pick your poison with a guard, like whoever's got the hot hands in a given game. It could be Devo, Battle, Ellis, Tremont Mark, whoever, but you get him involved in a ball screen with Trevin Brazil, and it's really pick your poison. Because obviously he can go up and finish above the rim. He's shown that he can knock down the three consistently. He's not a guy that you're going to give the ball to and say, hey, go create, go get us a bucket, whatever, off the bounce necessarily. But you can get him to his spots in different ways. And if you do, he's really going to cash in for you.
Yeah, I texted Curtis whenever Trevin, it was the first screen I've seen him set all year. And I think it was Battle or Devo where I was like, hey, they used him as a screener. Like, we talked about how he's basically a 6'10" shooting guard on offense for Arkansas sometimes. But I think we danced around it a little bit. That's the correct answer is when the game gets on the line in March, they're going to have, whether it's Battle, Mark, Devo, whoever, and they're just going to use Trevin in those as a screener. And I mean, that pick and pop, that pick and roll, that pick and whatever. That action, I feel like is going to end up being the best action Arkansas has offensively, which is interesting because we've only really seen it once or twice so far this year. But I think that's kind of something they're keeping in their back pocket, that especially once they start spreading some of these teams out. I mean, I just don't see that with the spacing and everything. I don't see how that isn't just going to be their go-to play.
Last one here. We're going to go back to Kingsley. He said the best part of the game yesterday, though, was getting Spicy E in the presser after a dub. I'll take that every time. Let me tell you something. That type of spicy Eric Musselman is awesome. Yeah. I will take that over the
30-point blowout loss, Eric Musselman.
The Oscar the Grouch t-shirt, like head down on the table, doesn't want to talk to anybody. That gets super awkward. And the worst part, about that is when it happens on the road and we have to do the post games on Zoom. It's awful, man.
He'll literally be up there like this.
Oh, dude.
Don't even look at it. You'll ask him a question, I'll be like, yeah, I don't know, Curtis. I just, it is what it is. Like,
It's
tough, man.
It's so tough. And the thing about it is, like, again, peeling back a layer of the onion here, for people, it's like, in some cases on a Zoom like that, like you use a little raise hand feature to where you can, ask a question or whatever. But the basketball SID doesn't necessarily follow that logic. And so after a loss like that, if you get to a certain point where like Muss is done talking to you, there's really nothing else to ask. But if you're not called on, especially before Bob, and he gets his chance to fire off 5 or 6 questions, like you get to a point where you're like, what the hell am I supposed to ask this dude at this point? And that's when it gets really awkward, because if you ask a bad question or you ask a question that he's already answered, like he's going to let you know about it. You might be able to get away with that with some of the other coaches, but like if you ask a bad question to Muss, like you're going to know that you did when it's all said and done. It's funny, man.
It's also funny because like how many times has it happened where we catch Muss in a good mood, whether it's midweek or whatever, and he like whenever Mike tells him that it's over and he's like, wait, we're done? Like that's it? That's all the questions? Like he wants to keep talking. But then you have some of those where it's like he wants to get out of there ASAP. Like he wants nothing to do with it. But I'm glad I haven't had that moment yet where Muss has really jumped down my throat. Though it did seem like he was going to give me like a 2-word answer last night for a second. I was a little bit nervous about that, but we battled through it.
I always know when I have him, when he calls me by name with like his second word. I remember down the stretch last season when I think they were, what was that? It was like at A&M, at Alabama, and at Tennessee or something.
Yeah.
And they were just getting killed in the paint. And, I was got to ask him about it. Like, you guys are giving up 60 points per game in the paint. And when he starts with, well, Curtis, I'm like, oh man, here we go. Like this is like getting lectured by your dad or something, like
he loves saying the name. That's how you know he's when he's like, well, your name, when he says your name. I remember the first time he said my name, I was like, yes.
Yeah, it feels good for a while. Yeah, you got to catch it in the right context,
right.
though. But all right, well, this was good. We got anything else? Did we miss anything? We've been doing this for over an hour.
Curtis, whoever the official scorer is at Bud Walton Arena, I would like to have a conversation with you. Listen, I'm just doing this for the integrity of the game. It has nothing to do with the fact that we posted on our site and told people to bet on Devo over 3.5 assists. He was credited with 2. There was one just point blank. Bounce pass to Jalen Graham. He immediately goes up for a floater and cashes. That's an assist. I don't know what level of basketball we're not calling that an assist, but we should have 3 there. And then he had one where he passed to Trevin Brazil, and Brazil did a little jab step, but he didn't dribble, and he went up with it after the jab step. And I'm like, assist, maybe. But whatever. We live and we learn. And of course, I picked Devo to have over assist the game that he takes 11 shots.
Yeah, go figure. And honestly, since we're talking about that, Bet Saracen, we love you guys. Get it together. You got to get those game props out earlier, man. Got to get them out earlier. We're promoting your stuff. We're putting the best bets on our predictions before these games. We got to have it before 5 hours from tip. Like, come on, be better. All right.
Agreed.
I think we're good here. This was an awesome show. We got UNC Greensboro coming up on Friday at 7 p.m. And then it's the Bahamas for the Battle for Atlantis. I'll be there. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be crazy. We're going to do this show again before that. I don't know if it's going to be Thursday. I don't know if it's going to be over the weekend. I don't know if it's going to be me going live with Andrew from the Bahamas. I don't know, but it's going to happen before Arkansas plays down there. Stay tuned for that. We'll definitely let you know, but this has been awesome. Appreciate you guys as always, the comments, the feedback, the thumbs up, the likes, whatever. We really do appreciate all of it. We want it to be as interactive as possible. You guys are what makes the show. Me and Andrew we're just here, right?
A monkey could do what we do. We learned today, or what I do.
So it seems that's the case, but
you're all seriousness, absolutely right.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys as always. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Curtis Wilkerson. On behalf of my co-host, Andrew Ellis, appreciate you for tuning in to Hog Hoops Live, and we will catch you next time.